Hello everyone, this is Pastor Blake, and we're continuing our study of the book of Daniel in chapter 11. Now this video is going to be interesting because 11 is so big and has so much information going on. We're going to do it in two parts. So this video is going to be chapter 11, verses 1 through 19. The video next week will be 20 through 45, okay? But as we continue, chapter 10 really starts this chapter out, really. Chapter 10 and 11 just go seamlessly next to each other. Chapter 10, there's events that happens, and then they broke that off because chapter 11 takes it's more into the vision other than the event of this being showing up, giving a vision. Okay, so chapter 10 is where this being, either Jesus or an angel, seems like Jesus could definitely be who this person was because of in Revelations, the bronze legs, the eyes like fire. But it's not specifically named, so we can only assume, okay? In chapter 10, there's a person that comes down, affects Daniel. He passes out. He regains his strength. He passes out again. And he's about to say, hey, I've been warring with the Prince of Persia, and then I'm going to tell you something. You are dearly loved. I have something that the Father is wanting you to know. And here we are with chapter 11. And it talks about how in the first year, in the very first verse, this was when actually Darius the Mede gave the decree letting the Jews return back to Judah. Now this is not Cyrus rebuilding the temple necessarily. This is just Darius with sending them back, allowing them to do this. So this is a different kind of time frame, but the same lineage of kingdoms, okay? And so, with this being said, this being, either Jesus or this angel, it shows that he made it possible. It says, I stood to confirm and strengthen him, as in the king. So this being actually affected the outcome of Darius letting them go back and be able to go back to their people, their Judah, the place where they were wanting to go back to. And so in verses 2 through 4, there's a lot of ambiguity in chapter 11. There's a lot of different moments where there's so much going on, and they don't really name too many names either. And so looking back through history is how we get a lot of our understanding through chapter 11. We see that he is definitely talking about kings, and even very small details were put in there to really make us understand who he's talking about. And so in verses 2 through 4 of chapter 11, the three kings that rose after Cyrus were Cambyses from 530 to 522, and this is all BC. And then after that, Smerdis, he ruled from 522. And then Darius is 522 through 486. And then Xerxes, 486 through 464, okay? And then, now this Xerxes that we're talking about, this is the lineage of kingdoms that we know exactly happened. So we're going to be going through a few of these during this chapter. And Xerxes is the same Xerxes as in Esther of King Ahasuerus. There is a lot of different translations that bring the word to mean, to be so different. Obviously, King Ahasuerus and Xerxes, completely different. There's all kind of reasons for that, but from Persia to Hebrew to Latin to English, the name changed quite a bit. But we do know that this is the same person that we're talking about. So when Esther was coming before the king to save her Jewish people, Xerxes was that same person in the background. This whole story of Esther was happening, okay? And so remember that for later. But Xerxes invaded Greece and was conquered by Alexander the Great in 336 through 323. That was kind of his reign over there. So Xerxes was invaded Greece, but yet was not able to overcome Alexander the Great, which is the king would have been represented in verse 4, that rose up in power but quickly fell because of his death and the separating of his kingdoms to his four generals. Now, if we look at verse 4, it says, his kingdom shall be broken down, divided into the four winds of heaven. Now, if you remember some of the previous dreams in Daniel, that there was four different generals that Alexander the Great's kingdom was divided into, okay? And so with that being said, that would have been kind of more represented the four winds of heaven, the four different parts of this world. But unfortunately, even though they're generals, the four generals of Alexander the Great, helped Alexander rise up in authority and power and create, literally conquer the known world the fastest anyone had ever had. You would think that they would get along with one another, but history really shows us they did not. History shows us that they were in constant battle, they were in constant war, and from this point on in chapter 11, we're actually really only dealing with two of the kings and both of their lineages and how they were fighting back and forth this whole time. And so we're not talking about only but two of them, and that is the king of the north and the king of the south, as you will read in chapter 11. It constantly is talking about the king of the north, king of the south. They're giving wives to each other, they're battling each other, they're destroying one another, one is protecting one another. So all of that is the king of the north and then the king of the south. Now the king of the south would have been Ptolemy, okay, a guy named Ptolemy and his lineage. All right, he would have kind of taken control of what we know as Egypt, that area, and then the northern kingdom would have been one of the Syrian kind of areas, and would have taken over Babylon. So let's just get into it. There's a lot of names in here. And so he rose up quickly in verse 4, but he was plucked, but it says, that the others would not actually have his same rule. They were different, and we know this through history. Alexander the Great's generals really destroyed the kingdom, honestly, themselves. They really did not uphold what Alexander the Great sought for his kingdom to be. In verses 5, we only see information about the two of the four generals, like I said. And remember the empires from the previous streams. It was Macedonia, Egypt, Syria, and Thrace. That was what the four generals' lands were divided up into: Macedonia, Egypt, Syria, and Thrace. All right. Ptolemy the first in 323 to 285 was the king of the south, which we know as Egypt. And then one of his princes would have been Seleucus, okay? Now Seleucus would have been the king of the north at first, all right? So Seleucus the first Nicator, okay, if you look him up, all right? There's plenty of information, was the king of the north. He was over the Babylonian area, and then, Antigonus the first took over Babylon and caused Seleucus to flee south to Ptolemy and help rule over him. Okay, so whenever we look at verse 5, then the king of the south shall be strong. One of his princes shall be stronger than he and shall rule, and his authority shall be great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. So let's stop right there. All right, so we know through history that Seleucus was invaded by one of the other generals. The other general's name was Antigonus, okay? He was invaded. He was one of the kings of the west that came in and then made Seleucus, the king of the north, actually run down and be one of the princes of the king of the south, which was Ptolemy, okay? And so we see this happening, but then all of a sudden, all of them got together and they went back up north and basically retook the land for Seleucus. But while Seleucus had that chance, he kept on taking over a whole bunch of other little areas and kingdoms and even become even greater than the king of the south, even though he ran down there, okay? Now that's just understood history, but that is one of the parts. One of his kings shall actually come up and be stronger than the southern. And so when we're talking about that, that's when Seleucus went straight up north after Ptolemy helped him, take back his land, and then just became even more powerful than him, okay? So and then from this point on, we'll see Seleucus and Ptolemy's empires and their lineages throughout the years just battling back and forth, never stopping, okay? So, after that, Antigonus the first took over Babylon. We know that Seleucus fled south and then helped him rule, helped Ptolemy rule. And then Antigonus was defeated in Gaza in 312. And Seleucus returned to Babylon and took over Syria and Media while becoming stronger than Ptolemy, okay? In verse 6, the two kingdoms which we're talking about here were in constant war with each other. They could not make amends. They were obviously trying to make bigger kingdoms for themselves, but finally trying to make peace. The king of the south, Ptolemy the second now, this would have been his son, the Ptolemy's first, the son, sent his daughter Benares to marry Antigonus. They're hard words to say. Antiochus, okay, the second. Now this would have been Seleucus's son, okay, Antiochus, okay, the second, the king of the north at this point. So the king of the south sent his daughter up north to marry the king of the north, which was Seleucus's son, Antiochus the second, and say, hey, you know what? Go up there, marry him. It'll be great. Our kingdoms will be together. We'll be all family. That's great, okay? When we look in verse 6, we see that after some years they will make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south, Ptolemy the second, shall come to the king of the north, Antiochus, the son of Seleucus, to the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her and he who supported her in those times. Well, we know through history that Antiochus actually tried to divorce his own wife at the time. His wife, we know, was Laodice, and Laodice had actually both of them poisoned, Benares, the daughter of the south, and then the king, Antiochus the second, had them both poisoned, okay? And because obviously she didn't want to be uninherited out of the kingdom, Antiochus was actually going to uninherit even her sons, his own sons that he had with his wife. But when she knew that divorce was coming, she had them both poisoned, and then the kingdom was kind of up in arms at the moment, okay? So that's kind of where we're at the moment. But when it says, it talks about her arms, her strength, when anytime in ancient literature we do see the arm as being a form of strength, of power, sometimes of royalty, but definitely of something of a command. A lot of even ancient coins and stuff, they had pictures of strong arms on them, and to represent power. So when it talks about strength in her arm, this would have definitely been some of that power and the ruler of it. And then he and his arm shall not endure, which is also the king that was also poisoned. But she shall be given up, and her attendants, and he who fathered her, okay? He who fathered her actually and will even fall, okay? Well, we also know that Benares, the daughter of the south, her father actually died the same year in Egypt. So these little bits of Daniel that he's showing you, they're kind of insane, because they're such minute details, but yet God is giving him these visions and these dreams this whole time, and he must have been like, why are you giving me all of this? So it's amazing what he was doing. But Benares' father died, and then in 7 through 8 we go on, and it says, and from the branch of her roots one shall arise in its place. Not from her, but from her own roots. So we do know through history that Benares' brother, Ptolemy's son, the second son, actually took over Egypt as Ptolemy III in 246 to 222 BC. In retaliation for his sister Benares' death by poison, he invaded the Seleucid kingdom, and conquered its own capital. So, he went up there and really just took over because of his sister's death. And so, and he went over and took over the capital of Antioch. Now, he took the vessels of silver and gold from the Syrian god's temple and returned to Egypt. After this, he made a peace treaty and stopped all attacks against the Seleucid Empire, which is interesting because when you read 7 through 8, it says in 8, he shall carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. And just like that, he stopped. And so Daniel's seeing all of these details, and we're seeing through history that all of these details, these very specific things, not only happened, but they were taken down. They were actually written down. So this was somehow important to the people writing it to know what was going on during this time, okay? And so when we see that that next happened, he took all the vessels, and then he just stopped attacking. In verse 10, he says, after Seleucid II died in 226, his sons, Seleucid III and then he had two sons, Seleucid the third, and then Antiochus the third, continued fighting against the Ptolemies. Okay, so the northern two sons, basically the kingdom was divided in two. They just constantly were attacking the southern kingdom. They did not want to stop. They just kept on going. Okay. So, because of that, Seleucus was actually murdered after a short reign. So one of the brothers was murdered, and then so his brother took over and created a strong nation. We know that for a fact, and it does talk about his son shall wage war and assemble in the multitudes of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass. So we do know that this happened. He created a very amazingly strong army and strong nation, and this would have been Antiochus the third. Okay, and so he campaigned in even Phoenicia and Palestine and made it to Ptolemy's the fourth fortress. So he actually took over quite a bit and gained a lot of ground. And then in verses 11 through 12, we see that through history, even Ptolemy the fourth responded quickly and severely, and he hurt Antiochus' third army. We know that over 10,000 even men died as a result of it. It was a battle that you can go and read. 10,000 died. However, Ptolemy's fourth was not able to keep control, and Antiochus the third came back more prepared and began to slowly take over all of the Ptolemy's empire. Okay, so we see that this has happened. His son shall wage war. We see that 11 through 12, and the king of the south moved with rage because he's up against your fortress. I mean, you got to attack him. He moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north, which is what was going on. And then it says with the great multitude, even into verses 12, it says, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, and he shall not prevail necessarily. So it was a major war. He hurt him, but he shall not prevail. For the king of the north shall come and rise again, raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. So the northern army kind of got hurt pretty bad, over 10,000 people in casualties, but yet he said, you know what, don't worry about it, we'll be back. And that's what he did. And so we do know he actually did come back. We know about 15 years later was the time frame. So when you pick up in verse 13 that he came back, this was about 15 years later after the 10,000 fell. That's why it says, he did prevail, but he shall not always prevail. And so he will come back with a bigger army, and which we know he actually did. After 15 years, and invaded Phoenicia and Syria again with a much bigger army. Ptolemy's king had just died. So the king that killed the 10,000 people, he actually died, and his son, Ptolemy the fifth, actually was taking over at the moment. And obviously a king seeing a transition of power, seeing that this younger guy was, he may have known some war, things from his father, but tactics, and understood his power, but that transfer of power is always a slight challenge, and he knew that this was going to happen, so immediately he just attacked him and was trying to get him while he was down, and so in the instability, the moment that it was happening, he was attacking. He was able to take over. Ptolemy did fight back, but never regained total control. So he fought back enough that he didn't die, but we know the nation was simply, at this point in history, just kind of started going downhill. They couldn't really recover fully. And we also know that even in 14, in those times, many shall rise up in the king of the south, the most violent among your own people shall lift themselves up. And so we know actually through history that the Ptolemy the fifth, all of a sudden, all these different people groups were attacking him. Basically, he had the roughest reign of anyone. I mean, the poor guy. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a righteous person, but he had it rough. Okay. We know that he actually had attacks from all kind of different other mini nations even. And because of that, his army had to be completely resupplied, and so much money was going out to recruit new people and to supply them with new swords, weapons, bows, and stuff. All of this was happening, so he put a major tax upon the Jewish people. A tax that was so much to the point it actually broke them, and they even revolted. And, we know that through 14, it really seems like and the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall not fail. And but they shall fail. And so the Jewish people, we know, did rise up, and because of the heavy taxation, revolted against him. And the Egyptian, and they were trying to throw their Egyptian ruler basically over. Now, this wasn't Pharaoh, this is way after that, but this is just that land, the area of Egypt, even more, a little bit more than just literally the place of Egypt, but a little bit more was the area. And the Jewish people said, you know what, we can't take this tax anymore. They tried to overthrow the empire at that moment. They actually attacked them. They revolted. And then one of Ptolemy's V generals, General Scopas, actually stopped the advancement and punished the leaders of Jerusalem and Judah very harshly. They said in research, they would have been hurt very badly. They would have punished them. They would have hurt them. They would have killed a lot of people to really show them that this, disrespect was not going to happen any longer. And so in 1516, Antiochus III fought back against General Scopas. The North came back down and said, you know what, we got to get the Southern Empire while it's down. And so he came back, General Scopas, and fought against him in Panium, in 198 BC. The Egyptian forces were defeated and fled to Sidon, so way down south, where the general actually surrendered at that point. And then Antiochus III took over Phoenicia and Palestine and remained in Syrian control until it actually remained under their control. So the North kind of took over the South until Pompey's invasion in 63 BC. This is not Pompeii like the movie, the whole volcano thing. This is a different Pompey. It's even spelled different. Pompey, okay? And but when they invaded in 63, that was actually a Roman control. So just like Daniel's vision of how first it was Babylon, then it was Medo-Persia, then it was the Greece, and there was a bunch of Greece, and this is all kind of Grecian generals and stuff that's happening. Then Rome came along, just like Daniel's vision said, in 63 BC, and then they were under Roman control. And we look through 15 and 16, and you'll see the parallels of how that was happening. And then 17 through 19 is kind of a block within itself. After the generals surrendered, Egyptian forces were now aligned with the Syrians, and so they were kind of all one big group now. And Antiochus III gave his daughter to Ptolemy. Okay, so they're like, you know what? We didn't kill the guy, but hey, we want this to be a united kingdom. This is before the Roman thing, so that was just a side note about Rome, but this is still going on in the Grecian Empire. And he said, you know what, daughter, go down there. We'll make amends. We'll have one nice old kingdom again. So Ptolemy V got someone to marry, thinking this would further his power in Egypt. And if you see at 17, which is funny, he shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom. He now shall bring to terms an agreement and perform that he shall give his daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand. Because obviously, what does the daughter do? It brings the kingdom under submission. There is no kingdom of the south anymore. He controls everything. But the thing is, it's funny. It says his daughter to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand or be to his advantage in verse 17. And we know through history, his daughter actually rejected the idea. She did go marry Ptolemy V, but did not help her father out. She actually helped him keep resisting and not send armies whenever the northern kingdom needed it, and basically just disowned her father for doing all of this, but stayed with her husband Ptolemy V. So that's wild. But however, this daughter turned against him, and but it was still he was still successful though. The northern kingdom, he was still successful. He took over more and more land in his conquest, and even made it as far as maybe even Asia Minor and possibly even Greece itself, all the way over there, just expanding this empire farther and farther. Okay, but was defeated by Roman and Greek troops. Rome made him sign a treaty, and with his son even as a hostage. They said it could have been up to 20 hostages. We know his son was actually one of them. The Romans had, and it made him sign a treaty that would tell him, he's going to stop doing all this, and forced him to pay a large tribute. And the king of the north, being defeated and having his hostage son, and he actually, while he was returning home, was killed by an angry mob while he was pillaging the temple of Zeus to pay for that heavy tribute that Rome had him. So he was expanding his empire. Rome said, no, you're going to stop it. You're going to sign this treaty. They defeated him. They made him sign a treaty. They made him pay a tribute, and he got killed by a mob trying to repay his own kingdom back for this tribute. And we see that through 18 and 19. Afterwards, he will turn to face the coastlands, which would have been around the Grecian area, and shall capture many of them. But the commander shall be put into his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn back his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face back toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and shall not be found. So we see Daniel is having a lot of things that he is being shown. We're going to go through the next few verses. Please read that 20 through 45 for next week. And Daniel's being shown this, and the Jews are all in this moment. The Jewish people are in the middle of this, being like, "What is going on, God? Like, how can all this happen?" But see, Daniel is also, he's not living through all of this. He's living and knowing, and at one point of this whole series, he dies saying, "Well, my people are still going to be going through all of this stuff." It must have been hard for Daniel to go through that. But as we look and see, God's still in control, and he says already what was happening. He already gave Daniel the visions of what was going to happen, so he is fulfilling his visions. So as we go through the next few verses, remember, God is still in control. Whatever is happening in your life, God is still in control. He knows the end from the beginning, and we're seeing it unfold in Daniel. Tune in next week for chapter 11, verses 20 through 45. Goodbye.